Colton, I am so excited to have you joining me today. You are such an inspiration. Your background, what you've done, what you're doing now. I mean, I'm going to let you share with most people know you, but for those that don't, I'm going to let you share a little bit of your background. But I'm so thrilled to have you in on this podcast. I love what you're doing, the support you have for mental health, especially in the LGBTQI plus community. It's amazing. And your transition now into your new podcast and your foundation. So much we're going to talk about today. So welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited as well. Just give us a little rundown of your amazing background, and then we'll dive into some in-depth questions.
Yeah. I played football for 17 years of my life. I was sort of born and raised in a small town in Illinois. And, after my 17 years of football were over, I played 3 years on practice squads in NFL. I hurt my shoulder and then sort of transitioned out and transitioned to entertainment landscape. And, obviously that sort of made me more publicly known, I guess. And then, during COVID, I really sort of struggled with my mental health. I hit rock bottom, and I know a lot of people struggled through that time. For me, it was a battle within myself of just coming out and having, a journey of self-discovery and really figuring out, what was healthy for me. And I'm so glad I did. I'm now married to my husband, and we're working on extending and building our family. So
Congratulations.
And I have a new podcast called Daddyhood that's out, and it sort of documents the fertility process. I have lawyers, surrogates, egg donors, anybody who has anything to do with fertility. I have them on to talk about their processes and what they've gone through, and how people that have questions can sort of lean into that podcast for answers.
That's amazing. That's quite a walk through a almost 20-year journey and into creating such an you've impacted people in so many ways, in so many different ways. And this is a really interesting and wonderful transition, because I don't think fertility and the mental health challenges around that are spoken about enough. So it's, and there's just so many challenges, within our own family. We've had miscarriages, and I have 4 kids now, but my eldest daughter had a miscarriage, and this is not an easy thing to deal with. And fertility issues, I have so many friends. So, what made you specifically dive in and tackle that? Because I know you had a whole, your foundation, we'll talk about in a moment, around cystic fibrosis and the mental health there, and mental health of NFL players. And I'd love to touch on that as well. But let's talk about fertility and let's talk about your podcast, because I think this is a really important topic that's not spoken about sufficiently.
Yeah, I think I realized very early on in this process, the fertility journey is very isolating. It's very lonely. It's also confusing for a lot of people, not only women, but men too. They don't really know where to start. And especially same-sex couples, I'm fortunate and privileged enough to be out in California where, get judged as hard and people, have connections to people who are in the LGBTQ plus community. So they understand that representation. But for a large part of our country, that's not the case. So launching Daddyhood for me was sort of just a tool for same-sex couples and just couples in general, even our straight community, to really lean in and understand what the fertility journey entails, what's IVF, what's IUI, all of these different terminologies, all of these different, sexual reproductive health questions that I've always had that I didn't know the answers to, and try to have experts on and talk to them about that.
And how are you finding the journey of this and the response of people? And you've obviously learned a whole lot of stuff that, people kind of categorize fertility issues as, it's the other, it's those other people. They don't really see what an impact it does. It's a societal.
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, I think what I've noticed the most is as our society puts a lot of pressure on women when it comes to the word fertility. And I think that's not the case. Obviously there's 50%, it's 50 and 50, right?
Exactly.
A men's sperm has to work too. And a lot of the times the doctors don't even have men test their sperm. They just automatically look to the women when there's fertility struggles. And I think, it's a little naive at this point. And also we have the technology. I really encourage a lot of men to go get tested, because, when I first got my results, I was shocked at how bad.
And how did that affect your mental health? And
it affected it greatly. I mean, it's a very isolating thing. My husband had great numbers, so you sort of don't get, the rock and mass support system that you're supposed to have. He was great and still supported, but it's different when you're on different pages. So it was a challenge for sure.
And being in the world of mental health, that can create such a lot of strain in a relationship as well. And I'm not saying it did it in yours, but I'm just talking from experiences that I don't practice anymore, but working with people in that is a big challenge. It's terrifying within a marriage, especially if that's a huge goal to have a child. And then just the process of IVF and so on is a huge challenge. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I, Jordan, we sort of joked about it at one point because we were going through the fertility process. We were planning our wedding and we were renovating our house. The three of the highest stress factors for couples that you could possibly be doing. We were doing all of them at the same time. So we were like, if we can survive this, we're going to be able to survive anything. And it's the truth though. I mean, all three of those are stressful on their own, but the fertility and family building is really emotional too. Has a wide range of emotions that you sort of have to process and go through as you enter into that journey.
Well, that is, taking on those three things at the same time is crazy. Are you getting good feedback from, like, guidance from specialists? Because specialists are so siloed, and here you put them on a podcast to talk about the whole big picture. Are you getting great? How's that working out? I'm quite interested to know, knowing a lot of people in the medical community myself.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think people are pretty shocked when they hear me talk about, I have a 9-person fertility team between my lawyers, my doctors, my surrogate, our egg donor, our agencies, everybody that's sort of involved in making a family for us, which is even greater than the number 9. But like that 9 people is sort of who we have contact with to even make this all possible. Let alone, the genetic testing experts that are in those labs, like actually handling our embryos and our sperm and our eggs. I think a lot of people are sort of jarred by that. It takes a lot of people. It takes a village to create a family for same-sex couples and just for families out there in general.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it takes a family, and then once the child comes along, that's another whole story as well. But the desperation and the anxiety and the waiting every month and that kind of thing can really play a huge role. What tips could you give people, and if that are actually entering into this journey? And I'd especially like to talk about from both perspectives, both from a LGBTQ perspective as well as straight couples. So what would be what are the tips and strategies that you could maybe suggest?
I would just say find your support system, like anything else in life, just making sure you have that support system, making sure you find what works for you. Is it therapy? Is it meditation? Is it exercise? Is it going for walks? And just like really having some sort of routine and schedule where if something happens that's jarring and throws you sort of out of whack, you sort of know how to recalibrate and get your feet back under you. That's sort of my advice. I think, for the longest time, I was sort of just a free for all and trying to make it work, and it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't always work. And that being able to bounce back. So the support is a huge thing. And I've heard you talk about this quite a lot in your interviews in terms of support. And we know as a society, we need people. We need each other. We need our communities.
Sure.
And so we're talking about there's a lot of strain and emotional strain in going through the fertility process. And as I said, knowing people and you going through this now and there's 9 people, as you say, but it's more having the support system, all these things. But then there's just that emotional strain on yourself, and you're saying the community is a huge part of it. What about also the whole concept of parenting and once you've got the child, I've got 4 children, they're all adult children, 3 of them all 4 work for me, 3 full-time and 1 part-time. It's part of our internal team. Parenting itself is a huge deal. How do you feel about, once the baby's there or babies are there and parenthood?
I'm so excited. I feel like, I've always been born to be a dad. It's sort of like this weird feeling that I've had my entire life where I sort of want to be a parent, be a dad. So I couldn't be more excited. I know I have a lot to learn. I'm not going to be perfect, but it's definitely something that I'm really, really looking forward to.
Well, I'm excited for you. One of the things that my youngest patients were up to 2 and 3 years of age. And a lot of what I did with patients was proactively helping parents to help children from as young as 2 and 3 to manage their mental health. So from a proactive standpoint, you've gone through your life transitions up to this point, and a lot of things in the Catholic arena. There was you talk about how you wake up in the morning and pray that God would take your gayness away, and how it took you until just a couple of years back before you actually were able to be totally honest with yourself, and that mental challenge, that aspects the mental impact that had on your life. Now, so that scenario of your life, now becoming a parent, and we put those two together, how would you handle now with your, whatever children you do have, from your experience being proactively managing your mental health? Have you thought about those sorts of aspects and how you would handle that? Is it too broad of a, is it asking you to jump too far into the future?
No, not at all. I'm a big believer in nurture versus nature. So I believe that you can shape and mold and love and teach a young baby kid, and then, they can hopefully turn into a good human being. So as long as I love my kid and I give them all of the tools that they're going to need in life, that's sort of my role as a parent. That's my role as a dad. And that's what I'm like, my goal and what I'm setting out to be.
I love that. So it's a proactive nature is so important. I can tell you now as a parent on the other side, you never stop parenting, by the way, no matter how old your kids get. And you know that because you speak so much about your dad and how he's been, and your parents as well, and how they were so amazing, how you moved back home.
Yeah.
That's when and I want to talk a bit more about that. But this proactive nature of being there for your child and modeling for them how to manage mental health experiences and so on is so important. So let's talk a little bit about the transition of when you did come out. And I know you talk about the concept of, you talk about how sometimes you went through a period where you abused your drugs and you were suicidal and medications, I should say, and you were suicidal, and what you did how you handled that and what you did in your life about that.
Yeah, look, I think, as a mental health advocate, I'm really understanding and open to whatever different people's healing journeys was. For me, medication was not the answer. It was a Band-Aid, and I needed a game plan, and I didn't have it at that time. So, naturally, I abused the medication that I was on for both anxiety and depression. The Xanax pills for me were, I was taking more than what I should have just to continue to feel numb. I really loved that feeling of not feeling like I had consequences, not really having to feel my emotions. So that was, for me, sort of that first time where I was like, oh, I'm not handling this right. Why is that? And when I, after a lot of work and talking to my therapist, it was just because I kept trying to shove down, the gay man in me that wanted to come out, that needed to come out, that needed to be authentic in himself. I just kept trying to shove him down.
You said in one of your interviews about how that from an age of 6 that you knew what your reality was, but because of your environment, and you talk about nature, nurture, there's also the concept of the I factor. So nature, nurture, I factor, and the debate of nature or nurture, which one is it most? And you immediately lean towards how you're going to bring your child up. And that's the I factor as well. So nurturing, yes, but the I factor, because you can have whatever nature, you can have whatever nurture, but at the end of the day, it's the choices that you make as a human with the nature and the nurture. And I think that in terms of your, background and what you've gone through, and from the age of 6, knowing that was your truth, but your nurture kind of suppressed it, but eventually your I factor won over and you came out. And as you say, you're a very well-known person from NFL, from The Bachelor, from your life. That could not have been easy. And I remember watching one of your interviews and it was very emotional. It was incredible. It made me very emotional. Would you share a little bit around that time of how you, related to the suppression, how you suppress? And I'd love to, once we've discussed this, I wanted to talk a little bit about the science of suppression and the neuroscience there, because I think you'll find it quite interesting and it explains around what you've done. But just talk about that time period and, what happened? What happened in your life in that arena?
Yeah, I think, for me, obviously I was abusing my medication. And at that time I moved back to Colorado to get help. I've sort of identified like, okay, this is not healthy. This is not good. I need help. And I'm seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist, 2 times a week. And I surrendered my medications. I got completely off of them as I was sort of building a new support system and working through the coming out process. But, I just was sort of running for myself. And then during COVID, I had nothing else to run. You talk about fight or flight mode for a lot of people. I was constantly in flight mode where I was always moving on to the next thing. And I was trying to distract myself or keep myself busy. And with COVID, you couldn't do that. So all of a sudden I really had to sort of face my coming out, which I suppressed for so many years. And I think upon reflection, like the main thing that I've taken away is, yes, I knew I was different by the age of 6, but by the time that I actually had a realization that it was because I was gay, after you go through puberty, you enter into your teen years, it's almost too late. Like I've almost sort of had these signifiers of between the church and sports and just family values in a smaller conservative town.
You had everything against you.
I had everything against me. I had, my faith and my religion said that being a homosexual is gay. I had the sports community that always used gay as a slang for weakness and or something you never wanted to be. And then I always wanted to be a dad. And there was not a lot of representation of same-sex couples at that time. So there was three main, factors that factored into that. And by the time that I figured out, oh, I'm gay, the voices in my head were saying, you cannot be. Like, you can't. You want to be a football player. You want to be a dad. You want to be a man of faith. You cannot be gay. So I tried not to be.
You tried not to be, and you cannot not be who you are. And eventually that explodes. So there's Colton, the DNA, the gene, there's the nature, there's the nurturing, which was all that you've just described. And then there's the I factor, there's you, and you have to be you. And what we see from the neuroscientific aspect is that if we suppress who we are, that is creating our bodies literally, mind, brain, and body, three separate things are literally wired for love. And it's like a volcano that's building inside of you, and eventually it just erupts. And it creates so much, so much trauma inside of one. I mean, you've come out on the other side incredibly well, but there's still, I'm sure, a lot of lingering, trauma and pain, and which takes time to work through. And so many people are in your position. And I know you're a massive advocate for helping people through this. Can you talk a little bit about just what advice would you give, and if someone came to you and, well, the question I'm asking you, how would you advise someone who's not being true to themselves in any aspect, but specifically, I think in this world where it's just so hard. I mean, as you said, NFL, like the Catholic Church, any church environment, small town, your whole nurturing was so much against you.
Yeah, I think I would first start by just saying everything is going to be okay. I think that's the first and most important step, because it does feel, you have fear in your head, and it's dangerous to be in your head at those times, because you're always thinking worst case scenario. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my friend. I'm going to lose the life that I love and I had, without the realization that once you come out, your life only gets better. And I think that was what the case was for me, is after I came out, I sort of had these new opportunities and new lease on life. And it was beautiful.
It's like when you lose one tribe, there's that fear of losing that tribe and then starting all over again and making those huge changes. It's terrifying, isn't it? It's terrifying. But then, as you said, you come out the other side, and once you're through the hard stuff, it's really to be able to persist through. Because I know you said at one stage you were having a lot of suicidal thoughts, and it was really hard for you to get through. That's from the suppression, the volcano had erupted in your life, and it was, what did you do in that time? Your dad you talk about your dad a lot as being a tremendous support in that time.
Yeah, I think, I had a lot of realizations that, I needed to really own who I was, and I had to come out to myself first, which I think, a lot of people when they're going through the
very key.
Yeah, I think it's really important that people, I remember vividly, I came out to my therapist, and I probably had 13 or 14 therapy sessions truly in the closet.
Wow.
Just like trying to hide, I had my AirPods on, I was in a closet trying to get as much privacy as I could to have these conversations that I was so scared of having.
Oh,
but
sorry.
You have to come out to yourself first. And I think that's the realization, because when naturally you come out, people are going to have questions. And I guess, it is okay to have the answer. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure this out. That is a completely fine answer too. But I at least wanted to have some answers of like working through it with a therapist and letting them talk to me as I'm like processing this, so that I can try to have some answers, not only for myself, but for other people too.
I love that. And what were some of the answers that you got? What were some of the things that you could use to help others? What helped you? What were ways of explaining?
I think the realization that, okay, this is going to be fun. After you come out to that first person, you sort of get that confidence. You get a little bit of like,
once you start the story,
that wasn't that bad. And once you start talking through it, and they're like, you're not crazy for doing this. Like, this is what a lot of men in our country have done.
Yeah.
It sort of all started clicking in. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not a bad person. I'm not trying to figure, like, it sort of gave me the reassurance that like I wasn't alone in this, and I wasn't that oddball that I always thought I was, that there are a lot of people like me and a lot of people need help like I need help.
Oh, absolutely. That's so encouraging to know that once you start the story, once you tell it once, the second time's easier, and to know you'll get through it, and to know, to hear and to tell the people on the platform that you reach that, yes, you had the suicidal thoughts, yet the medication didn't work for you. And I mean, I agree with that I prefer a non-pharmacological approach, which is exactly what I've done in my research and my therapy practice too. But to be able to tell someone you'll get through this, and evidence there. So it's really great because you could have just, hidden away from everyone and gone ahead with your life, but you've been so public with it, and it's fantastic because I think it's helped. I know it has helped probably hundreds of thousands of people with you being able to talk about being your authentic self. And it's not just, Colton, I know we're talking about coming out of the closet, but so many people are not authentic with so many things. And I know you're deeply spiritual, and I know that you speak about how your spirituality is actually deeper since you've been more authentic. So I'd love to talk a little bit about this concept of being authentic with yourself and how it played out in your life, but just in general, being authentic and how that's impacted your spiritual life and just what it's done for you as a person. You've touched on it, but I'd love you to go a little deeper on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, everything's so connected now. I remember one of the conversations that I was having when I was coming out was, I'm really scared to come out as a Christian and gay. And I'm scared to come out as gay to my Christian friends. So it's like, communities don't always see eye to eye.
Not at all.
I don't want to alienate both of my communities. And like, what do I do? But I could confidently say, like, being gay has made me a better Christian man. And I think we'll realize that of once you're living in your authenticity and you sort of lead with kindness and love, and you're at peace with yourself, you can be at peace with other people and other things going on in your life. And there's sort of been that calm now since I've come out of like, okay, everything, even, the worst case scenario can be thrown at me and I'll find a way to make it better and or get through it and move through it. Because once you battle what I've battled and, hard suicidal thoughts and your mental health and mental illness, you really feel like you could take anything on. Because it couldn't have gotten much darker for me. And I found, the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's so encouraging to, once you've battled that, you're even stronger than before. So you could take the throws, that you can take what people throw at you, and your resilience. You have unlimited resilience. That's part of I work in the field of psychoneurobiology, and there's this thing that there's this messaging out there that's so incorrect, that we don't have, that resilience is sort of this limited commodity, but it's not, because the more authentic we are, and that's where I'm leading to, the more authentic we are, the more resilient we become. And then the more, and the way you've sort of reached out, there's also research showing that the more within our most challenging times, when we reach out and help others, that's when our own resilience just gets, like, the doors get thrown open. And, and that's how, when I look at your life and just, observing you, I've always prepared for my interviews, that's the feeling that I get, that you open that door of resilience. As you said, you hid by flying. So you opened this door to resilience. So you had an experience with a Reiki healer, and that talked to you about that you've got father issues. And I thought that was fascinating, because I think that was kind of unlocking a key for you and really opening your resilience and your ability to really reach out and help others. Your pain turned into helping others. Could you talk about that experience? And correct me if I'm wrong. That was my perception of just, listening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in trying everything once. And I feel like there's no right or wrong, or just there is in your healing journey. And I went to this energy healer, and the best thing I can compare it to is about 30 sessions of therapy. Is what it felt like. And I've just been left in this euphoric state of just feeling like I had more answers to the questions that I've had. And he really broke it down beautifully for me. We obviously spent the first half of it just talking, and I felt very much like a therapy session where I was just sort of venting and talking what's going on in my life, what's happened. And he sort of just had this intuition and awareness about me of growing up at the church. And he said, he's like, why did you say, you grew up in the Catholic Church, say the Lord's Prayer? And I was like, Our Father. And he stopped. He's like, stop right there. And he goes, Father. He goes, I don't mean this like everybody else probably in our society means this, but you have daddy issues. You have father issues. Like, you have always found that point person of authority, and you've learned, and you were programmed since a young boy to never fight against that authority. So whether it was your dad, or if it was the priest, or if it was your coach, or if it was your producer, or if it was whoever that authority person is in your life, whether it's on a job, in a professional setting, in a personal setting, you have been programmed not to fight against them. You've always, you've been in flight. So when conflict arises, you just move on to the next thing, which is sort of true too. I don't get into more astrology and all of that, but I'm an Aquarius as well. So I love my independence, and I sort of like, once I'm burned, and I move on to the next thing. Easiest way for me to heal is just sort of like, okay, I'll put my energy over here now.
Transition over and suppress the volcano. Hopefully it won't burst.
Until the volcano catches up with you. But yeah, so it just sort of painted this picture of clarity of like, oh, that is why I sort of just jump onto the next thing, because I'm scared to actually say what's on my mind, what I need to say, and what the best route would be for me to go about things.
Well, you certainly don't do that anymore. So I think of your life as a volcano, like most of us are living with volcanoes in ourself. Well, all of us, I believe. And they do erupt at some stage. And I'm sure you're aware, when a volcano erupts and the lava cools down, then it remineralizes the soil. And then what grows back is even healthier than before. And we either go through that process, which is what you've done. And now you've remineralized the soil, and now you're flourishing in your life as married with your husband, potentially looking at fatherhood, helping other people with fertility issues, recognizing the huge impact on your life. So now immediately what you're doing is there's this remineralized life where everything you are going through and have gone through, you've turned into something to help others. It's beautiful. For many years, which led to the suicidal stuff and the medications and the sadness and suppression, whatever, was the volcano that just was constantly bubbling up and then being pushed down and going dormant. And then it bubbled up again and it was even bigger, and it bubbled up again and exploded. And so you, as I see you now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like you're trying to help people say, hey, before that volcano gets so big that it like collapses your life, like just try and, let the volcano erupt, a little eruption, and handle little things at a time. So that's how I read you. I did a little bit of mind reading there. So how do you agree, disagree? What does that stimulate in you?
I agree, but I also, I think, I'm trying to lessen the amount of volcanoes that are in my life now. I just like to put the fire out right away. I think there's a lot that you can do if you're just sort of upfront and lead with that honesty and transparency. And sometimes it hurts, and it's going to be a hard conversation to have, but I guarantee it's easier and better to be done in that moment than later down the road.
I love that. And can you give an example of that? How does that look different in your life too? Because you lived a life of suppression, and as you said, you flew. Now you're not. I think I always
sort of just sacrificed my happiness for like what the public perception was and or what people needed or wanted from me. I was just like very chill and go with the flow. And I still am a pretty chill person, but I'm way more in touch with like what makes me feel good in those moments, and being able to choose. I think, having a healthy amount of selfishness to protect yourself is
so good.
And obviously there's a fine line with that, but I'm more aware now of, when I need my alone time, when I need time and I need to make decisions for myself.
That's amazing. And if someone, like it might still happen when someone from the church or someone who's uber religious and sends you maybe an ugly message or challenges you verbally in some situation and tells you, things like you're going to hell and all that sort of, the terrible things that are said, which has happened in our life. And as a family, we've had that experience with my son. How do you handle that? Because it's how do you handle that? Let me not put words in your mouth.
I've done it all. I've tried to kill him with kindness. I've tried to be snarky. I've tried to be funny. I've tried all the different replies. I've tried not replying. I've tried blocking. I've tried moving.
Oh gosh.
There's, once again, there's sort of no right or wrong. It's sort of whatever I feel and need in that moment. But the biggest thing that I've taken away is that's not about me. It's about them. It's about their realization and their sort of journey of their own healing, whatever that might look like. And typically they're projecting. If they're pushing negativity and, their beliefs and what they feel so strongly in a rude way to me, that's not about me. That's about them.
That's so good. So you've actually protected yourself and put up, instead of absorbing that into you and getting really upset and worked up, you've actually put up.
I feel sorry for those people. I feel
agreed.
They're in that light and in that position to, the majority of the time, 100% of the time, they're strangers. They don't know me outside of my shows and outside of following them on Instagram. So that Yeah. It's sort of that realization.
That's fantastic. That's a really good point that it's not about you, it's about someone else, especially when they're pushing and coming with their agenda and yeah. And then also changing did you lose a lot of your tribe when you, for want of a better word, when you shifted over to when you actually stepped into your authenticity? That's a better way of putting it.
It was a mix. It wasn't, I didn't burn my entire life down. I rebuilt it in the way that I wanted it to be rebuilt. And there's people who've come back around in the last year that haven't been in my life in 3 or 4. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm definitely open to sort of all of that. I think the most beautiful thing, and I think the thing that I can say confidently is it's the most diverse and best support system and group of friends that I've ever had. I think that's where I'm at right now in my life, is I'm living just in such bliss just with a support system and friend group.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think that what you've been through has made you appreciate those moments differently?
Definitely. I think perspective is everything. And I'm also just the friend groups that I do have now, understanding, the privilege that I have with, my family and my friends and the support that I got coming out, while it was met with some scrutiny at times, I, was able to document it and to help other people with it and use my platform for good. And I think I've learned so much from those people.
That's fantastic. Let's transition back to fertility and in the community, the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. That's a huge challenge. And I know you're a big advocate now to help. Can you talk about those struggles and, what you're doing to help and what people can do to actually support?
Yeah. Well, right now I currently have a bill in front of Congress. It's called the TEAMS Act. It's targeting emotional and mental stability. It's bipartisan, and it essentially just asks for the government to help with resources to specific universities for their mental health programs. Those resources can only be used for mental health programs, whether it's 24/7 crisis text lines, peer-to-peer counseling, new additional therapists going on. So I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited.
Amazing.
And I think there's a lot of work that we can do.
And it's already running. It's already going. And there's already
no, it's not going yet. It's been introduced in both the House and the Senate. Okay. Our government has to approve it all.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that's all happening currently.
Yes.
Along with all the other things that you're doing.
Yep. Sure.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, congratulations for that. And I know that's going to change so many lives. Let's talk about your foundation.
Yes. So my foundation's primary program right now is that TEAMS Act that we have, and we're supporting all college athlete mental health. And just such a great place to start. I mean, right now, more than ever, college athletes are facing struggles with being able to earn money, with social media at its all-time highest, and also just a transfer portal. They're able to transfer sort of at their own will. And while that might be good at times, the negative is they lose their support system when they leave that state or that university that they're at. They have to find all new care, and they're sort of thrusted into a new environment, and it's not always a healthy.
Let's talk about that. That's really a challenge, because you also talk about the fact that they encourage to create their own brand and social media platform, and they're trying to be an NFL player. They're transitioning maybe to another state. There's so many aspects there, and everyone looks at NFL player because athletes as, oh, you've just got it all together. Your life's so great, but it's actually it's coming out more and more, as we know in the media, how many people are in the world of professional sport are really battling with their mental health. And how it's just the support isn't there because there's an expectation that, hey, you've got it all together. You've got your physical under control. And there's such an emphasis in mental health with a holistic approach to deal with the physical. We know that the physical helps depression. Having been in this field for nearly 40 years now and doing clinical trials and research, the mind-brain body connection is everything. So how you can have all the physical exercise and attributes and success, but there's still at the end of the day, how are you managing your mind? What mind management is happening and the impact of that? Could you talk a little about the mental health challenges of being a professional athlete?
Yeah, before even professional starts, these college kids now are making millions of dollars, have, some of them millions of followers on Instagram already, and their brains are still developing. They're still developing as humans and young adults and trying to figure themselves out. And they just have an immense amount of pressure on them. And I think being able to support and help them feel less alone at that level is what's needed.
Totally. And what are some practical, actual strategies, steps of helping them? What does helping them look like?
Yeah, I think it's just providing them with resources and access to therapists and to care when they need it. I think, there's a shortage of therapists in our country right now. And once certain universities, these athletes need specific therapists and psychologists. They can't just go to a general population therapist because it's different problems and you need sort of that specialist. And I also think just from a culture standpoint, the coaches and the trainers need to be trained on signs of depression and anxiety to be able to communicate properly with the athletes in a way that's not going to be standoffish.
So you're advocating for getting the educational side plus the specialized therapy side and the empowerment, and then also creating an environment where people feel that they're comfortable enough to be able to share. And that's that authenticity again, that they're going through a struggle without being looked down upon. I train a lot of physicians and work in that field as well. And I mean, they're too scared to tell someone that they've got a mental health challenge because of the way mental health has been packaged in the last 40 years. You know, instead of looking at a person's story, and this is the whole thing with this whole biomedical model. And I'd love your take because you kind of mentioned about, you know, you tried everything and drugs didn't work for you, but you know, medications didn't work for you and you had and I mean, this is wonderful. We want to be able to talk about these things. What the current model is very biomedical and it's very much around diagnosis and it's compared diagnosis and labeling and it's very much compared to cardiovascular issues or diabetes. Meanwhile, it's not. But prior to that, mental health was seen as what's your story? What's going on in your life? What's happening? You know, Colton, you know, he's gay and he's had to suppress this because of his community and religion and all that kind of stuff. So we don't instead of saying depression is part of is a signal of a story, one of many signals. It is seen as, oh, that's the symptom of disease. And that's really held things back because if you look at the statistics, people are so much more. There's an increase. People are dying younger from if you don't process the volcanoes are exploding, your body's slowly getting sicker and sicker. Your mental health is suffering. You know, all those things down the line that happen, and then the medications shorten your lifespan and blah, 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 all these kinds of things. So I'm a big advocate for what we do on this podcast, a big advocate for helping people to understand and have that knowledge component and understand more. And I say all this to say, what does this stimulate in a response to you? How do you feel about that? Are you aware of this transition of this current model, which is a sort of 40-year-old model of, you know, let's just diagnose and label and lump it under a medical disease versus what's your story? Tell us your story. This is how you can process it, especially coming out, you know, out of the professional.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm not a professional by any means. But
I understand, but you've experienced it. You've been interested because you've been in it.
Yeah, I think everybody's story is unique and individual. And I always try not to speak in definitives when I'm telling my story. Like for me, medication was not the answer. But I'm not going to sit here and say to not be taking medication because I do believe there's certain specifics that people should take medication for. And there's certain mental health illnesses that need medication or you need to be on it while you're sort of putting these systems in place to That's just one small example, but I definitely think it's not a one size fit all. Different people think different things at different times. And also I'm a big advocate and I think what I would encourage people to do is if you find a therapist that you love and enjoy and you're getting so much good work out of, stay with them by all means.
Fantastic.
But different phases in your life, you're going to need different things. I needed a gay man to be my therapist while I was coming out. But then after I came out, I needed a different therapist. And before that, I had a different one. And when I was playing football, I had a different one. And I actually feel like that is, you know, if I was to challenge anybody and just say, this is what's needed, it is okay to seek different help at different times.
So good.
Finding someone specific to what you're going through is really important for therapy.
I'm so pleased you said that. It's so vitally important because of the way our structures are set up. It's like, that's the authority. They know everything. There's something wrong with me if I'm not progressing, but there's so often you maybe just don't even get on with the therapist. It just doesn't, it's not a match. It's not a fit.
Or you're just going to therapy to say you're going to therapy. I think that is a calculus too. So.
Exactly. And then also to recognize it's a common issue that, you know, the therapy, everyone's got issues and it can actually, you know, their issues can boil over into yours and to know when to move on and and not to feel guilty about it. That's really fantastic. Do you have any advice, last couple of questions, do you have any advice for couples that are gay, that are wanting to have a child and go through the fertility route and need the support because there's so many challenges? Can you just talk for a few moments about the challenges and how to help overcome, besides listening to your podcast, which is going to give people a lot of tools?
Yeah, definitely. It's called, my podcast is called Daddyhood, and we have everybody come on from our fertility lawyer to our fertility doctor to surrogates to egg donors to sperm donors, and just to paint a picture of like what the process is like. But I would just encourage anybody who's interested is start somewhere and get tested, get your sperm tested to make sure that you have viable sperm. That's step one. And then from there, just making sure you're in a state that legally can protect you through your IVF journey. I think that's, in my opinion, step 1/1A, 1B. So making sure that right team. And then from there, it's like anything else in life. You need to build your support system. You need to build a game plan with your husband, with your partner. And if you're doing it solo, with yourself, write it down. What's your process? What's your pros and cons? I know like when you're making different decisions, it really helps me by writing it down.
I love that. That's incredible advice. Well, Colton, thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for spending this time with us. I know you're touching lives and changing lives, and you have already done that. And who knows, the way you started and the great things that you did do and the transition and the public eye, you're impacting people, and that's what we're here for. At the end of the day, we want to help others, don't we? It's very evident.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was beautiful and such a great combo.
I loved it as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.